Hello, mind mappers, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over Solving the Procrastination Puzzle by Timothy Pychyl, PhD, a concise guide to strategies for change. Procrastination is something that we've all dealt with at one point or another in our lives, and it can be difficult to get through. But this book is full of scientific strategies to help you overcome procrastination and to stop it before it even starts. It's a very concise guide with a ton of actionable advice, and that's what we're going to be learning today. With the introduction, I pulled out a quote that I believe gives us a good overview of what we can expect inside of solving the procrastination puzzle. And Timothy says this: if you are reading this, it's probably because you are bothered by procrastination. You may even be reading this because you are procrastinating right now. You're avoiding some other task. I want to make the time you spend off task right now worthwhile. That is the purpose of my writing. An hour from now, you will be prepared to act differently. You will be prepared to be more successful in your goal pursuit. Are you ready to get started? That is one of my most basic strategies. Just get started. In this book, I explain why this works and summarize the research evidence for such a simple and practical strategy. And I ask you again, are you procrastinating right now? Like Tim says here, let's make this hour of procrastination fruitful. If you're here, take notes, make your own mind map, or pull out the real strategies and be ready to use them in your life. See, we want to not procrastinate passively here, but let's procrastinate actively. Let's use this time to move forward, even if it's not in the direction that you're intending to do or the direction that you're procrastinating on. It's a good time to notice something. It's a good time to check in with yourself. Procrastination doesn't stop us from doing everything. This video and book are actually brain heavy activities. Often we think procrastination only leads to the easy things, watching Netflix, playing a game, or listening to podcasts. But you're here. So that means procrastination can take many forms. Watch out. It's a tricky bugger. And the most basic strategy that Timothy points out right in the very beginning of the book is the first strategy: get started. Why does this work? Well, we'll talk more about it later, but get started is really a core strategy within we can work to overcome this procrastination problem that we sometimes have. First thing we need to know is that the most basic thing, we need to bite the bullet, we need to get started, and we'll talk more about that in one of the big ideas. Before that, we'll talk a little bit about mind mapping. You can get the most out of these mind maps by following along. Find the process of how I mind map, plus all 50 plus of the mind map templates, including this one at the link down below. You can follow along because it'll help you learn more, help you remember better, and apply these books to your life. Our first big idea is puzzle. We're going to kind of identify the rules of engagement here. Procrastination is the voluntary delay of an intended action, despite the knowledge that this delay may harm the individual in terms of the task performance or even just how the individual feels about the task or him or herself. Procrastination is a needless voluntary delay. Procrastination is this needless voluntary delay. Procrastination, contrast to many other forms of delay, is that voluntary and quite deliberately turning away from an intended action, even when we know we could act on our intention right now. So we have the ability to do something, but we just don't do it. There is nothing preventing us from acting in a timely manner except for our own reluctance to act. This is the puzzling aspect of procrastination. Why are we so reluctant to act? Why has it become our own worst enemy? We undermine our goal pursuit needlessly. Why? And how can we solve this procrastination puzzle? All good questions to ask. Why are we procrastinating? Why are we failing ourselves? Why are we kind of self-sabotaging? Why are we ignoring the things that we need to do when we know we need to do them? To understand the procrastination puzzle, that voluntary but needless delay in our lives that undermines our goal pursuit, we need to understand this reluctance to act when it is in our best interest to act. We also need to have strategies to overcome this reluctance, because just because we know that we're reluctant to act doesn't mean we know what to do about it. So really this puzzle is all about, why do we fail to act when it's in our best interest to act? Right? That's what the puzzle is all about. And the interesting thing about this puzzle is it doesn't have just one answer. this book is full of a lot of different strategies to help you overcome your procrastination, a lot of which are helpful. But I think that might make it easy to miss this first big idea inside of this quote. Most of us skip over the why am I procrastinating part and go to how can I fix myself? And we dive directly into that. We don't even think why am I procrastinating? We go, how can I solve this problem that's causing me pain? And of course, that's totally admirable. You're willing to make a change, hopefully to allow you to stop procrastinating. But I think if we took a step back and understood why we procrastinated, we would understand a little bit better. My experience is that self reflection is this incredibly powerful tool to help understand the playing field. Instead of trying to fix something, I think it's often better to seek to understand first. This way, we can make our best attempt at solving the underlying issues instead of just solving the symptom again and again. Here are a couple questions to journal or simply ask yourself when you're procrastinating or when you find yourself procrastinating. Think about, what am I feeling emotionally right now? What am I feeling energy-wise right now? What will happen if I finish this project? What am I expecting of this project? Have I listened to myself about this project, or have I forced myself? Now, I'm not going to tell you what each one of the answers means, but it's good to start doing some self-reflection around why you're finding yourself procrastinating. And once you know the why, then you'll have a better motivation to actually go and do some of these tips and tricks that Timothy's going to show us here. So let's talk about motivation. The problem is pretty obvious, as is the solution. Let go of the misconception that our motivational state must match the task at hand. This is actually very interesting. This is probably one of the things that I took away from this book, number one. In fact, social psychologists have demonstrated that attitudes follow behaviors more than, or at least as much as, behaviors follow attitudes. When you start to act on your intention as intended, you will see your attitude change and motivation change. Waiting until you feel like it might just be the worst thing that you can do for yourself when it comes to getting things done. What is the number one excuse that we use for not accomplishing what we want to? I just don't feel like doing it right now. The problem is that not feeling like it compounds very quickly into never getting it done. Shown here is actually the fact that feeling like it isn't the prerequisite for getting it done. Motivation and state are as influenced by actually doing the thing, then actually doing the thing is influenced by your motivation. So in other words, let's say I don't feel like reading a book, or I don't feel like doing a mind map, or I don't feel like doing the voiceover. If I can actually just get myself to get 2 minutes in, 2 to 5 minutes into doing the thing, my state starts to change. I start enjoying reading the book. I start enjoying doing the mind mapping. I start enjoying doing the voiceover, even if I was kind of completely against it, completely in a different mood, a different mode, so to speak, before I got started. So the first 2 to 5 minutes of what we're doing might be difficult because we don't feel like it, quote unquote. More often than not, you'll start and you'll feel like continuing once you break that surface tension. And this is related to almost everything. So, how do we go about getting motivated? First, I think we need to know that feeling like it can't always be relied on. You can't always reproduce this feeling of readiness to accomplish the task, or to work on the project, or to read the book, or to take the test, whatever it might be. Next, I think we need to know that feeling often follows action. So we need to get started, as we talked about before. We need to get started, 2 to 5 minutes, break that surface tension, and all of a sudden, as if by magic, we start to feel like doing the thing. And that helps us continue down the path of accomplishing the task that we set out to do. Our next point, I believe, is a very important point as well, and that's this concept of predecision. So, in short, implementation intentions are a powerful tool to move from a goal intention to an action. As I've outlined in earlier chapters, these implementation intentions take the form of if-then statements, something we've talked about quite a lot on this channel. I recommend that you check out Gabriel Oettingen's book, Rethinking Positive Thinking, because that's what this book is kind of all about. That book is all about. The if part of the statement sets out some stimulus for action, and the then portion describes the action itself. The issue here is really one of predecision. We are trying to delegate the control over the initiation of our behavior to a specified situation without requiring conscious decision. If I say to myself things like, I'll feel more like doing this later, or I don't feel like doing this now, then I will just get started on some aspect of the task. See, that's the if then statement. This one's kind of an example here, right? So we talked about before with motivation, sometimes we just straight up don't feel like something. And that is almost the thing that stops us from accomplishing something the most. So you can see that Tim set up an if then statement for when he doesn't feel like doing something. So if he doesn't feel like doing something, he's just going to get started on one small piece of the task. And that's essentially what an if then statement is. You can use it in many different areas of your life. I think this is a great example of how to use this if then statement idea to get the work going, which again is really what we need to start, is just get started. So making the decision before the decision needs to be made, it's a powerful way to shortcut procrastination. Often we leave our schedules and our lives up to our momentary whims. Maybe we feel like waking up in the morning and we ask, what do I feel like doing today? This often leads us to choosing to do something less meaningful than we would really want to do. I think this is also one of the appeals of having a career or a job. You go to a place where someone tells you what you have to do and what time. And that is very kind of alluring, especially to those of us that have trouble keeping ourselves to a particular schedule. But if we want to be an entrepreneur, if we want to be a leader, if we want to be the person that's in charge of our own schedule, which is one of the most important parts in career fulfillment, is that autonomy. Cal Newport talks about that in his book, Deep Work. We need to be able to manage our own attention. We need to be able to manage our own schedule. We need to be able to overcome procrastination. And we can't leave our schedules up to our momentary whims. Willpower-based decisions are hard to make moment to moment. Waking up and doing mind maps versus watching a YouTube video is hard. Waking up and meditating versus listening to a podcast is hard. These are examples from my own life. I'm sure you have some of your own. Unless we've decided what we'll do already. See, if I wake up and I don't have a plan for the day, I have to make a willpower-based decision every single time I'm going to do something throughout my day. I have to decide between the 20 different things that I could potentially do, and your willpower starts to wear out pretty quickly. But once we've made the decision, once we've decided what we're going to do, which I'm positing that we should do the day before, especially when it comes to the morning, then it's as simple as starting. Remember that our state or preferences follow our actions. So when I wake up first thing in the morning, I might initially feel like watching a YouTube video. But if I can get 5 minutes into reading a book, if I can get 5 minutes into mind mapping, if I can get 5 minutes into doing a work project, a marketing project, then I will start to shift my state, shift my preference towards doing that thing rather than watching the YouTube video. So my only real job in this procrastination puzzle is to get started. And by making decisions with my willpower, I'm making that much, much harder on myself. So we need to make a pre-decision. If I wake up in the morning and I feel like watching a YouTube video, I am going to start my mind mapping project instead, right? That's where this if-then statement comes in. It's a huge part of what we've been learning on the channel. Again, you can check out that book, Rethinking Positive Thinking, for a full overview on that. But let's take a practical look at something you can change right now. What decisions can you make today that will make your day less likely to slide off track? Here are some examples. Tonight, I will set up my coffee maker, airplane my phone. I'll fill up my water bottle so that I can easily do 15 minutes of meditation in the morning. Here's another example. After work today, I'll write down a list of 3 items that I need to accomplish tomorrow, and before I look at email or any other inputs, I will stroke at least one of those off of my list. Those are 2 pre-decisions that I've made that make it easier for me to get started, which is what we're going to talk about in our next big idea. The quote is this: notice we are not using the famous slogan, just do it. It's about just getting started. Then doing it will take care of itself once we get going. If we think about just doing it, we risk getting overwhelmed with all there is to do. If we just take a first step, that's much easier. As a strategy, you may find that you have to just get started many times throughout the day, even on the same task. This is very common. Even in meditation, we have to gently bring our attention back to our focal point, whatever that might be, our breath, a mantra. The thing that we need to remember is that just getting started may happen many times in a day. So, this idea between the big, just do it, you have a whole task that you have to do, a whole day worth of things, just do it is a big, daunting task. No wonder we're procrastinating. That's a ton of energy that our brains might not want to burn. But if we say we just want to get started, again, we get that state shift and it's much easier to keep on going. He points out here that you might have to just get started several times a day. You might have to do it once in the morning, once in the mid morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the mid afternoon, just to kind of keep yourself going, right? You take a couple breaks throughout the day and you have to get back into the flow of things. Here's what I want you to take away. Don't worry about accomplishing anything. Just get started. It sounds pretty backwards, right? Almost all personal development books focus on setting big goals and focusing your mind around them. But what if that's actually hurting you just as much or more than it's helping you? Sure, we want to know where we want to go, but if we set this big audacious goals, we see how much work we're going to need to do. I mean, no wonder we can't get started. We plan to work crazy hours, endure stress, or any number of things that we have planned for ourselves without thinking, what is my state of mind going to be like when I have to accomplish these tasks? So, should we resolve not to get anything done? That's kind of the opposite side of the coin that some people take, right? It's either you set big goals and you go out and accomplish them, or you don't set any goals at all. I don't think that that is the right way to go about it. Of course, different things are going to work for different people, but I think that not setting goals defeats the purpose of overcoming procrastination. Instead, I think let's focus just on getting started. Focus on the first 5 minutes of the task, the first 2 minutes of the task, the first 5 pages of the book. This gives our minds enough time to switch states and get motivated. It's a skill. You have to recommit time after time after time, and it ends up leading to huge results. It ends up being that the people that get the most done are not the ones with the most focus. They're not the ones that have the most rigorous schedule or the biggest goals. They're the ones that are willing to get started again and again and again, breaking that surface tension 2 to 5 minutes and get started again and again and again. It's how we overcome procrastination in the moment. Our next big idea is just a minute. It will only take a minute. Puts me on a slippery slope towards procrastination. It's approaching midnight, and Ari still hasn't started to work on his report, even though he sat down at his computer at 7 p.m. When he got to his desk earlier that evening, his intention had to be to get to work. But he thought, I'll just update my Facebook status. It will only take a minute. And now, hours later, he is still there. He's still on Facebook and he's still scrolling. How many of us has this happened to? Notice how our minds use this get started principle against us, right? We talked about get started right up here and how if we get 5 minutes into it, we get a minute into it, it's easier to keep doing that thing. This is really the opposite. Our minds are using this get started principle against us and it makes us procrastinate. When we get off course, we never do it thinking, I'll just binge Netflix all day and all afternoon. Instead, we might start with, let's just watch one episode, or let me check my newsfeed, and eventually you've wasted the whole entire day. I'm sure this is ringing true to a lot of us. The get started concept is working against us and for our distractions in this scenario. Here's an example in the book, a quote that he pulled from one of his blog posts. It said, I'm procrastinating, and that's why I'm here. I just Google things I'm thinking about like this, or like hear some hum of a familiar tune, so I look up the song to know who sang it. I mean, that literally takes just a minute, but then it makes me Google a couple of other things, and it ends up lasting a lot more than a few minutes. And I honestly don't realize when I end up reading the Wikipedia page for some random disease that some singer had that was related to my singer, I was just looking up. Wait, why was I looking him up? Oh, right, because someone at my school was humming a song by him. Oh, right, school. Essay due tomorrow. I haven't started. Like right now, I just realized I'm commenting on this article. I wish I could read those articles about my essay and try to get 2,000 words on a paper in a day. Now, this is kind of a scattered quote, a scattered comment from a blog post, but I think it really depicts how our minds are working in this kind of get started in reverse principle that we're talking about. It really is kind of scattered, thing to thing to thing to thing, and never really diving all the way into something, or never certainly intending to dive all the way into something. Because here's the thing, if you want to watch an entire season of Game of Thrones on Netflix, as long as you've decided that that's the thing you're doing, you're not procrastinating. You are just doing exactly what you set out to do. So, how do we beat this? How do we beat this get started in reverse? Really, it's about being conscious and setting some ground rules, making some pre-decisions that we talked about before around how we're going to manage distractions through the day. These pre-decisions should make it hard for you to get started being distracted or get started in reverse, as we've kind of coined here. Here are some examples. Don't check any social media or email until the first task is done. If you start the day by checking social media time after time after time, that is going to be what your day looks like. How you start your day is very often how you end your day. Turn off your phone when you get home from work. You don't need to be distracted. You don't need to be kind of doing these small little minute tasks all night when you could be connecting with your family. Block all social media apps on your computer and on your phone, and set a ground rule not to get started on surfing the internet, because we all know where it leads. The internet is kind of a black hole, and we can put a lot of attention into it and not get much back out if we're not careful. Our next big idea is about multitasking. On top of all of this is the myth of multitasking. I say myth because, despite popular beliefs, research indicates that only a very small percentage of people can actually multitask effectively. Humans have a very limited attention channel. We are better off focused on one thing at a time. Tragic traffic accidents are only one example of how potentially dangerous the myth of multitasking can be, as texting drivers lose their focus on the road. The more mundane tragedy of multitasking is how we deceive ourselves into thinking that we are actually doing our work, when in fact we are attending sporadically to our task in between email, social networking updates, internet searches, e-commerce, and gaming. That's really what we're doing all day long sometimes, is we're supposed to be working on one particular project or task that is super important to us, but we're kind of bouncing back and forth and working only sporadically on the thing. Most of us now feel the need to focus on multiple things at once throughout the day, working on a project, checking our emails, and communicating via messages. Research shows that this might be the worst thing that you can possibly do for your productivity. Constantly switching from task to task leaves what Cal Newport would call attention residue, meaning we can never pay full attention to one task. I recommend you check out Cal Newport's books, by the way. Very, very good. I've done a review of all of them on this channel. Talks a lot about this attention switching and how bad it is for us. Multitasking, not a good thing. Next, we're going to talk about the power of flow. When we're focused on more than one thing, we can never dip into what scientists call the flow state, which is this magic-like power where we can be 10 times more productive, and not only be 10 times more productive, but produce our best possible work. All of our attention, creativity, and drive goes towards completing one specific and meaningful task, meaning our projects not only get completed faster, but we produce a higher quality of work. And that's the power of flow. That's what we want to get into. But if we're constantly switching from task to task, flow is not achievable. How can we achieve flow? First, we need to know that we have to be focusing on one thing. That's the main thing. We need to focus on one thing at a time. I like to write that one thing down on the piece of paper that we talked about before. And next, we need to have an end time. We need to have like a specific, okay, I'm going to work for 45 minutes. I'm going to work for 30 minutes. I'm going to work for an hour. You have to choose. And I like to use an egg timer here on my desk. I turn it to 45 minutes and I'm ready to go. Another helpful tip is to play some instrumental music. I generally like to listen to something like a lo-fi hip hop, just beats, no lyrics. And the reason I do that is because that helps me get into the flow state. It helps me kind of move into the flow state a little bit easier. I start playing the music. 2 minutes in, I start to feel like, okay, I'm getting there. 5 minutes in, we're starting to be into the flow state. And we've broken that surface tension. Music, for some reason, just makes that a little bit easier. If you want to learn more about flow, you can look at Deep Work by Cal Newport, Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. You can look at the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, all really great books about how to achieve flow and why flow is so important. Our final point, I believe, is the most important point of this entire book. Something that's missed in almost all personal development books is compassion. The self-change process is uneven. We truly feel like one day we leap ahead and the next day we fall back. Although we have to be committed to change and firm in our efforts to be strategic, we also have to be kind to ourselves during this challenging process. We all face setbacks, disappointing moments, and frustrations with our apparent lack of progress. Your attitude towards these setbacks in yourself will be extremely important to your continued progress. Be kind but firm with yourself, and be willing to forgive yourself when you do not live up to your own expectations. One of our recent studies was about this issue of self-forgiveness and procrastination. It has important implications for each of us, and as we take the self-change journey, what we found was that forgiveness for procrastination was related to less procrastination in the future. So I'll say that again. Self-forgiveness for procrastination was related to less procrastination in the future. What do we often do? The opposite, right? We often don't forgive ourselves. We often replay our procrastination in our mind, make it worse than it ever was, and replay it 1,000 times in an attempt to motivate ourselves not to procrastinate again. For me, self-compassion is the missing ingredient in the change process for almost everyone. The coaching clients I deal with, myself, just my friends and my family, self-compassion, so important. All of my coaching clients, or almost all of my coaching clients, I should say, are extremely tough on themselves. It's a mix of self-criticism, feelings of unworthiness, and negative self-talk. You're likely pretty close to them. They all come from this channel, so you're likely in the same boat. These are, in my experience, all learned behaviors. At one point in their lives, probably more than once, the self-criticism motivated them to actually accomplish something. Therefore, they pick up somewhere that it's a reliable way to get stuff done, right? They might have negative self-talk to get themselves to work out and ended up getting in really great shape and getting the girlfriend that they wanted or something like that. They may have negative self-talk to them all the way into feeling motivated enough to accomplish something in business and making a certain amount of money. They pick that up and they see, okay, this works. And they think that's a reliable way to get stuff done. Most of the time, they're coming to see me simply because this process eventually short circuits. It has for me, and it has for almost all of the coaching clients that I deal with. Instead of having motivation at the cost of a little self-criticism, they actually now have a massive amount of negative self-talk and no motivation to speak of. That is why practicing self-compassion is so important to the change process. Motivation through self-criticism only works for so long. It's generally very difficult, it works for a short amount of time, and it always costs more than it rewards. Self-compassion is a long-lasting source of motivation. It should be the one that we're trying to use at every single point in our lives, if possible. It's a difficult change for most of us to make simply because we're so used to this negative self-talk as a way to get ourselves motivated. But I'm telling you now, if you can get into self-compassion as a way to motivate yourself, it will be the best thing you ever did for yourself in your entire life. Now, that's a bold statement. That was Solving the Procrastination Puzzle by Timothy Syke, PhD. Thank you for being with me here today. I want to offer you something for staying all the way until the end of the video. There's a link down below in the description. That is a free coaching call with me. If you're struggling with self-compassion, if you're struggling with procrastination, I would love to help you with it. Completely free. I'm not offering it to the people that didn't watch the video all the way through because I know you're committed. And I want to give a little bit of commitment back to you. Thanks for being with me here today, and I hope to see you in the next one.